And I think individuals with disabilities bring so much to the workforce that other people like myself, had we not had this life altering experience, things I would have never thought about, like a missing curb cut or, at a bank, having a teller station that is wheelchair accessible. These are just things that seem very minute to the able bodied population, but they make those that are living with disabilities feel included.
All right, welcome back to the Spero Means Hope podcast, where we take storytelling to a whole new level by sharing amazing patient stories, review experts in the community, and share resources for community and patients. So today we have with us Kelly Lamb. Hi, Kelly. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm doing awesome. It's a beautiful Friday here.
Yes, we are very happy it's Friday.
Yes. So, Kelly, thanks for being on the podcast. Can you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself? So, where are you from? What do you do for fun? And what do you do for a living?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and I found my way to Arkansas via the University of Arkansas in undergrad. My husband is from Little Rock. And so for fun here, I love anything outdoors. It's a beautiful part of the country. It's finally warming up, so it's nice to be outside. I love to run. And then probably my favorite thing is to go to live music. I love concerts and anything arts related. The ballet or theater are really all things I enjoy.
Nice. Any favorite artists?
Favorite artist, goodness. Yes. I am a true millennial through and through. So growing up, in high school, I had my emo phase. I love like,
Me
like
too. Me too.
so I love Death Cab for Cutie. I've seen them like four times. They've actually been here to Little Rock, which was amazing to have them like in a small venue. I'm going to see Bright Eyes next week in Little Rock, so I love all of those bands. But I also love like different forms of music, Taylor Swift, Chapel Roan, all the things. I have a very diverse genre of music.
That. And like I do know they were playing in Arkansas, so that's awesome.
Yeah, no, we have a great mid-size venue here that's been drawing in incredible talent. So we're really lucky that we get it for just kind of a small city.
That's awesome. And then I think that Arkansas is also named the natural state, right?
It sure
So like
is.
great for outdoors and everything.
It is. And here in Little Rock, the terrain is really beautiful. It's considered the Ozark Mountains, and so it's just really hilly and beautiful. And the city is situated on a river, and it's just a gorgeous part of the country. I grew up in Kansas City, so just the vegetation was even so different. Like the first time I moved here, I didn't realize like how much pine there was, which also set off the allergies with the pollen. But yeah, it's a really, really beautiful part of the country, and people come here for all kinds of outdoor activities as well as our national parks.
I love it. And Kelly, what do you do for a living?
I am a senior development manager for the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. So I work in fundraising for spinal cord injury research, as well as to help fund our resource programs that cover all forms of mobility impairments and paralysis. And I work in particular within the peer to peer space. So, what that means is individuals that want to fundraise for Reeve, I help them be successful. Our most successful programs are our world major marathon programs. So that would be New York, Chicago, Boston Marathon for anyone that are big running buffs, or hand cyclists or push room athletes as well. And then we also have a really great DIY program, which is called our Team Reeve All Stars. And that could be for anyone that wants to do anything. We've had children that have done bake sales to donate the proceeds to Reeve, all the way up to people that host their own golf tournaments or like what you would like a five-course meal to benefit Reeve.
I love everything about that so much. So much. And
Yeah,
so
it's a
for
really fun job.
it sounds really fun and like I have so many questions about it. But
Sure.
for a starter, for those who are not very familiar with the Christopher Reeve Foundation, can you give a little bit about background about who Christopher Reeve was and how the foundation got started and some of the resources you guys offer?
Absolutely. So, Christopher Reeve was an actor, for those that aren't familiar. He was Superman, extremely popular. And unfortunately, in the 90s, he had an equestrian accident and he broke his neck at an extremely high level. He was a quadriplegic and he was dependent on a ventilator. This was obviously like a huge shock to the world. I think he was one of really the first people that was so public with a spinal cord injury. And he really helped push forward not only the idea of advancing the research, but also the resources. So, in lockstep with Christopher was his incredible wife, Dana. And so the foundation is actually named for both of them. Well, Chris was really focused on supporting the research side and advancing cures for spinal cord injury. Dana built our resource center from the ground up. And it is the reason the Paralysis Resource Center exists today, completely for free for anyone that wants to take advantage of it. And all of the resources we provide through what we call the PRC for short are again completely free because we work to secure grant funding and donations every year to make this available to anyone in the country and the world. But she was really focused on okay, yes, this is great to work towards a cure. But what about impacting the quality of life for not only the individuals living with a mobility impairment, but all of their loved ones and caregivers as well in the right now?
That's awesome. And how did you first get connected with the foundation, and how did you end up in fundraising?
Sure. So, my husband, he was my best friend at the time, John David Bruning, or I call him JD for short. And you can see my cat in the background. But so JD and I met at the University of Arkansas in 2009 when we both started college, and we were best friends all of college. And after we graduated, he was staying in Northwest Arkansas to work in finance and commercial real estate. Much like Austin, Northwest Arkansas is just exploding. Like there, it's grown so much. There's so many businesses and tech companies coming there. So it was a really exciting time to be in that field. I had always dreamed of living in New York City. And so when I got a job in New York, I jumped on it. And I moved to New York literally right after graduating. And so just about a month after graduating, I got a call from one of JD's best friends. And he put John David on the phone and he told me he had broken his neck from a diving accident on a river. So again, I'm sure in Texas and other parts of the country, it's super popular to float rivers. It's a great outdoor activity. And so they were at the end of a float trip, and this was the area where you would pull off your rafts or canoes and give them back to the rental company, and then people would just like wade in the water and hang out before they had to go back to their cars. And there was a pedestrian bridge above the river, and JD and his friend went up to jump off of it. And last minute, he just instinctively dove instead of jumping. And that's how he sustained his injury because the water level was much lower than they had anticipated. So he's a C4, C5 quadriplegic. And obviously, like anyone that experiences any injury or degenerative disease diagnosis, it was devastating and life altering in the matter of minutes. He ended up having surgery in Little Rock with a great team, and then was able to continue on to the Shepherd Center to do his first inpatient rehab stay. And Shepherd was amazing. And so I was living in New York, and he really wanted me to stay there and, have that part of my life because I had really wanted it for a long time while he figured out his rehab plan long term and then also re entering the workforce. So I stayed in New York for 4 years, but it really was just like I was just in a really depressive episode because of just the reality of his life. And I knew like we were going to end up together, so like I knew it was partly my reality as well, at whatever point we got there. And so I watched the New York City Marathon in 2013. I lived on the Upper East Side. I was not a runner by trade. I grew up a ballet dancer, thought I wanted to dance professionally, and then decided I wanted to go to college instead. And so after I made that decision, I started doing track and field. I was a pole vaulter and a sprinter.
Wow.
But there was nothing in my wheelhouse that was over a mile. Like when we had to warm up and run a mile, I was like, this sucks. I really don't want to do this. was like not a good time. But I watched the New York City Marathon come through that morning. It was the first time I had ever spectated a marathon, period. And I was just so moved. There were just there were just there were millions of people that spectate the New York City Marathon. Sorry, I have a cat that I have to move. And I watched the hand cyclists and I watched, double amputees run this marathon and just all, just the everyday runners that were embracing with their loved ones. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. Even if it's only once, like a New York City bucket list item, like I want to do it. And so I knew again, not being a person that's like motivated by physical challenges, I was like, I need to do it for charity because I think that that will like hold my feet to the fire. And I can't quit. Like if I ask people to donate, like I have to make it to the start line and hopefully the finish line. Um, and so I reviewed the charities on the New York Roadrunners website, and one of the first ones I saw was the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and I obviously knew who Chris was. Unfortunately, at the time, like I did not know that their resource center existed, and so I read about it. I was like, "This is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do." And the rest is kind of history. Although I still do not love running, it really is like so hard for me. I did 6 marathons in 5 years for the Reeve Foundation. And yeah, because my husband is so loved and so well supported, and because we had such great support at the Reeve Foundation, we were able to raise over $100,000 for them.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Wow.
yeah. So it was a life altering experience, not only from the fundraising and that being so humbling to see so many people that genuinely cared, even complete strangers that caught wind of our story and decided to donate, but also to get fully integrated into the foundation and to start using the resources and realize that, this is not a big organization, but they provide one-to-one support to anyone who needs it, and do so much with very little, as well as seeing the research advancements progress in real time. Like that to me was the most motivating factor, and it became kind of my why. I realized like this sucks. I hate training for a marathon. Like it made me really grateful for my body, and its ability to handle that amount of work and to be able to recover. I came to realize all the things that I take for granted every day that someone living with any mobility impairment experiences. So, yeah, so I ran for 6 years. I moved back to Little Rock. I worked for another big nonprofit, and then this job opened up in 2019, and the CEO called me, and I've been there ever since. And it's just really been the greatest experience. And you always get a little nervous when you support and love an organization. It's kind of like meeting one of your favorite celebrities. You're like, oh, am I going to hate them after I meet them? And so I was always a little worried, like, oh no, what's going to happen when I get on the other side? And it
Yeah.
just made me fall in love with Reeve more because everyone is so true to their word. We have, I genuinely believe, the hardest working staff, such a diverse staff, and so many individuals on our staff that are living with a disability, which I think that really speaks to us putting those forefront with our mission, and that, we really do walk the walk.
I love that. And I do want to take a second to really like congratulate and acknowledge the fact that you ran 5 marathon. That is amazing.
Thank
It's
you.
no small feat in any way. And you didn't just do it once, you did it again and again and again. And then
Yeah, my
again.
team keeps asking me when I'm going to do another. I was like, I might do Boston next year. We'll see. It's as I know, all Texans know, it is extremely hard to train for a fall marathon in the South, because you are running in the dead of summer heat. But a spring marathon seems more in my wheelhouse because of I can train in the wintertime.
That's amazing.
Thank
I'd
you.
love to explore a little bit more that professional transition. So from being on the
Sure.
side of like participating in a marathon and raising for you running to now having a role within a foundation. I like when people reflect on their professional journey. You mentioned when you were younger wanting to be a ballerina. So
Sure.
how do you feel like your background has prepared you for the role that you're in now? And does this look anything like what you thought you were gonna do when you were a little kid?
Sure. So I think when I made the transition, and decided that I was not going to try to pursue dancing professionally. I had no clue what I was going to do. For those that have studied classical ballet, and you're on that trajectory of like, no, this is all I want to do. I want to bypass college. I want to audition for companies. Um, you really are so laser focused. I think ballerinas, much like gymnasts or anyone that's like in an intense sport, are extremely motivated and dedicated. I was extremely type A. It was really good for me in terms of not only dance, but also being goal oriented with school. I was always like very focused on my grades. But when I made that transition, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Like, I could do anything, but I have no idea. And I unfortunately went to a really big high school, and we had a great program called Youth in Government, and it's similar to Boys State and Girls State,
Okay.
but it's run through the YMCA. And so that got me really interested into politics. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll study political science. We'll do that. So when I got to Arkansas, I studied political science. I really enjoyed economics, and my counselor was like, "You should pick up a double major because it's hard to get a job with a political science degree." She was like, "Well, it's harder." And so I was like, "Okay, that's fine." Like, I really loved economics. I thought the two were very naturally well connected. I think it gave me a better understanding of political issues to understand the economics of them because I think most decisions are tied to economics. And so, when I was preparing to graduate, really like my long term goal was to end up in DC, or to someday go to grad school and take the Foreign Civil Service exam, and become a diplomat abroad. While that would have been cool, I'm glad I did not choose that path. Working in politics today, I don't know that I would be having that much fun, although I'm grateful for all that do. But so I always was still like really motivated by that like advocacy piece. Um, I've always been super passionate about social issues and just my mom would say like as a kid I was like almost too empathetic to others' needs that I would just like really let it like hurt me when something bad would happen to someone else. Um, so I've always carried that with me. And then I got offered a job in New York City. I worked with Macy's corporate. So if anyone's familiar with Macy's, it was not, I never intended to work for a retail organization, let alone like a for profit entity. But it got me to New York. And really, I was like, this is my first job. It does not have to be my forever job. I ended up staying there 4 years. I learned really great skills at that company. And I didn't love it all. I really didn't love it, but I was like, I know that I'm learning really great skills. I loved my colleagues. I loved the corporate setting. And so I was like, okay, like I can apply these skills into nonprofit work. And really, I don't know that I would have ever gotten to nonprofit work if I had not fundraised personally for something that I cared about. That was really my only springboard into development work. And so I had done so much personal fundraising through Reeve, and kind of shown throughout my resume that, like, I could do this in a professional setting, especially for something that I care about. And that was my springboard to get my first job at the American Heart Association. And so I worked in development for them. They had a great mission, but for me, like Reeve and paralysis was always going to be my number one priority. And so I was just really grateful that, they had seen how committed I was to the cause and to fundraising and, really trying to up the ante every year with my fundraising. That when the job came open, they called me. And so, yeah, and I've been there ever since. And I really think, it's what I want to do forever. People are always like, don't say no to opportunity, but specifically within the peer to peer space, because unlike my colleagues, like I'm not making major donor ask. I am working with individuals that are asking their neighbors, their grandparents, their work network. And, we're talking about like sometimes asking for a $5 donation. And I love that. I love the idea of just like getting the mass quantity of donations over just like very large donations. And the people I get to work with, most of them are impacted by some form of paralysis, either themselves or a loved one. And it's just really special to learn their stories and kind of guide them through the same process that I went through when I first joined Team Reeve.
Um, one of the things I love, of course, interviewing like anybody, but when I talk to people that work in a nonprofit sector, I think there's a different kind of passion that's
Sure.
really, really, really echo with every sentence. And even from you, first stepping into nonprofit with the AHA and then transitioning to a cause that is very, very close to home. That passion in every sentence that you're saying, you can see it. And so I love that you like ended up right exactly where you needed to be. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was, I just remember this, it was like a core memory. When I found out I got the job from the AHA, I was like actually in my little, or from the Reeve Foundation, I was in my AHA office in Little Rock. And the day I told everyone, and my colleagues started crying because they were like, this is what you were meant to do.
Oh,
And I love the AHA, I love their mission. I really do think their mission impacts all Americans. But it was just like everyone knew like this had kind of been my baby. And I was like, I wanted to see it through. And I was actually just having this conversation with a colleague this week that she also had a similar path into the foundation. She was a fundraiser and then came on full time as staff. And she was like, "Do you ever think like people ask you like, well, you're pushing and you're leaning into your trauma situation because a spinal cord injury or a degenerative diagnosis can be extremely traumatic." But for me, I've always found like one of the best things that has come out of my husband's injury and experiencing this life is being able to help someone else. That
mm,
really is like the biggest thing I can do because I think specifically within this space, so often you are just bombarded with information, especially if it's an abrupt spinal cord injury, like a car wreck or a fall. And like they say, it's like drinking water out of a fire hose, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think a lot of people inadvertently make mistakes. We made mistakes with my husband's care early on because we didn't know to call the Reeve Foundation or other resource groups. And so to be able to kind of be that bridge or to be really early in someone's injury or diagnosis to help them or help guide them, I think is really impactful.
wow. I'd like to go back to the second half of you and JD's story. So, since
Sure.
we're just mentioning him again, so you're in New York City. You're staying there for 4 years. JD is recovering. I think at that time he's at Shepherd in Atlanta.
Hmm.
How did you? When did you move back? And then how did you guys get connecting and transition from best friendship to you guys' marriage now?
Sure. I think we knew all of college, like we were going to end up together. Like it was more than a best friendship. So, like, honestly, when he got hurt, so he doesn't remember it, but the day he got hurt, he called his mom and then he called me. And so, I just the moment it happened, I was like, okay, this is forever. I didn't date another person. I didn't text another person. I was just like, I'm gonna be in it with him. And so naturally just kind of stepped into that support role, went and saw him once he moved to Shepherd, and it just kind of naturally progressed. Like I was just trying to um, give him support every day over the phone. For so long, he couldn't even speak on the phone because he had to be trached at one point, and just adjusting to that. Um, and yeah, I mean, I knew. I think he knew too. He struggled a little bit with letting me in because I think he thought, like I don't want this to be your reality as well. And to which I was like, we both get to choose. I do think that that was something unique about our relationship, and that no one was forced into anything. I also don't. I understand people always have good intent. I don't like the fact that people say like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a good person for choosing that." And I was like, "Well, like I knew I was in love with this person. Like it, that's not it at all." Like I was like, he
Yeah.
would have done the exact same. And when people say that to me, I'm often like, you have no control over what happens in the future. We have no control over getting in a car wreck or getting diagnosed with ALS. And I always like posit this to people and say, like, if your husband was diagnosed with a degenerative disease tomorrow, would you just leave him? Or if you had a child that was born with a disease or has or develops special needs, like, are you just going to leave them? And they're always like, no, of course not. And I was like, exactly. Like
Yeah.
you could marry someone and they get cancer the next day. And I think like if you're committed to that individual you are. And that's how I felt about John David. And so we eventually, I think it took like about a year and a half to be official, even though like I was approaching it like we were the whole time. But I think for him, like he had to work through that. And I totally understood that. And then, we've just transitioned through that ever since. I started to learn some of his care routine before I moved back to New York City, but it really wasn't until I moved here that we really dug into like me being part of his care team and caregiver. To now, I'm his full time caregiver. He just finished law school and took the bar exam. He went back to school a few years ago. And so we are now starting to look for PCAs to help with that. Um, but yeah, he's done an amazing job. He never wanted to go to law school. But after his injury, he knew that this would be a great path and a field that he could do with. He didn't need his hands to do it. And I think we see that all the time at the Reeve Foundation. We see so many quadriplegics that go to law school, and I think it's really incredible because I was a poli sci and econ major, and so half of my peers were pre-law track, and I was like, absolutely not. I could never do that. And here he is, like he did amazing, and he just accepted a job this week. So I'm really proud of him.
Well, congratulations to him too.
Thank
Like that,
you.
you guys have
Yeah,
some
thank you.
pretty awesome milestones going on. So
Yeah, it was a long journey, but he did it, and he really excelled. And I'm just really grateful for all the support he had at his school and from our family and friends throughout the process.
wait. Kelly, how do you manage the different hats that fill your life? So, how do you manage the balance of caregiving and then also spouse life and then employment? And what do you do to kind of decompress, or how do you practice self care?
Sure. So I think it's difficult. I will not like sugarcoat it. Like this life is not easy, and we are so fortunate because we live here in Little Rock with my husband's parents, and so they are always here to help fill in. Like for instance, I was just in Denver this week for our Reeve Summit conference, and his mom stayed with him throughout the week, so we didn't have to pay an overnight caregiver to stay at our house because obviously that would be extremely expensive. So it's not easy. I think the main thing is that JD and I are really good at communicating with each other. I think open communication is the number one thing. I think he and I can both read each other's body language very well. He has an innate sense to tell when I'm really struggling or feeling burnt out. And he's really respectful of me and everything that I do. Um, so like it's like small things like my husband thanks me for things all the time, and like he doesn't have to do that because it's obviously like he does not want to receive this care, but he has to because of his limited mobility. But it's just like those small acts that are like, I see you, I'm acknowledging that like this is hard and not ideal, and I really appreciate it. Even things like I'm very type A. I like things to be very organized and clean every night. And he's like, you do not need to put the dishes away tonight. Like, just get in bed and watch a TV show. Like, it will be fine. So, being reminded of those things, also working for an organization like Reeve that allows me to work remotely has been a lifesaver. It's given me the flexibility to obviously still care for my husband and allow him to be successful, to go to school and make a career. So if there's any employers listening, I think that's a really big thing too. Is um, I think we should acknowledge that everybody does their job differently, and that a person doesn't have to work necessarily 8 to 5 or in an office setting to be successful. Oftentimes, I find when you give people the flexibility, they work harder, and they do a better job.
Yeah.
So I think, having a supportive employer that knows, like, if I'm not online for an hour, it's probably because I'm doing something that I have to do right then, but I'm going to get my work done regardless. And that's so up to the individual and their relationship with their employer. But I do wish more employers um, entered their relationship with a new employee with that level of flexibility. And so that has been immensely helpful. And also just the fact that like my husband knows that like I need breaks, and so does his family. Like for instance, just going to the Reeve Summit, like not having to caregive for a few days, or having other trips planned, like with my girlfriends. And, it's such a difference. I know caregivers that care all the time, whether it's for children or a loved one, or if you're a PCA to someone that you didn't previously know. It can be a little daunting. Like every day is like there are things you have to do, like not that you want to do.
Mhm.
And to be able to get those reprieves, I think is really powerful. I realize like I operate in a place of privilege to have the support system that we do, and also to have the means to take trips. So like I don't, you know, I understand that there are a lot of people that just don't have that around them, or they don't even have the finances to leave their hometown. So I think if there are other people listening, I think, there are small things that they can do. Like, can you, if you're a nursing student, can you organize a respite program within your nursing program that says,
Mm,
it's an online sign up sheet, like will provide respite care to a caregiver for 2 hours a week. And not, maybe it's not regularly, but like for a lot of people, like that can be really life saving.
yeah,
Just to not constantly like, I feel like for us, we're always on like a schedule of like, okay, when is the next time I have to give my husband pills? So like I might be at the grocery store and taking longer than I anticipated. I'm like, oh God, I got to get back. Like we're due for 5 o'clock pills. But yeah, I think having individuals around that get it. I also think people need to be honest with the people around them. I don't like to ask for help. Most people don't like to ask for help. And it wasn't until, I really started to be honest with people when I was not doing well. And they'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this for you. It's much like when people experience grief, you often hear, like, let me know what I can do for you. People are never going to text you and say, hey,
yeah,
can you bring me a meal today? Like, I don't have the capacity to cook for my family. It's the people that just show up. And maybe it's they show up and they say, hey, go on a walk with your dog, go get your nails done, or, take your kids to the park or whatever it might be. And just forcing them to leave their home and do something for themselves, I think is really impactful. Me personally, I love yoga. Like yoga is almost always a cure all, especially hot yoga. I've been bad about going lately. And then also like being outside is really good for my mental health.
I like how you're like giving amazing ideas. So like the nursing students like maybe starting a respite program, or like empowering people to reach out to a friend that they know may need help and may not ask for the help. I think those are all like amazing ideas. Would you say that if you look at society at large, and in your experience, like navigating the world with JD, maybe it's going out to a restaurant or going taking a trip, would you say that our society is pretty welcoming of those that have mobility deficits, or have you guys experienced like negative experiences, or maybe like prejudices, or anything like that?
Yeah, so my husband would be so mad at me if I did not share this story because he laughs. Because when I lived in New York City, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so great. The subways are not accessible. Like, you can never count on the subways in New York. And also, like, especially if you're in a power share, the gap between platforms can be pretty wide, which is dangerous. But like, you can never count on the elevators working. Not every station has an elevator. But I was like, the buses, they're amazing. They can get you anywhere. I used to love to take the bus. Back then, we didn't have Wi-Fi underground, so it was nice because I could stay on. I'm aging myself. You could be on your phone if you were on the bus. All these things that we've now come accustomed to. But I was like, the buses we can get anywhere. And so my husband had come, JD had come up for the marathon with his family, and we were going down to pick up my bib packet for the marathon and all that stuff a couple days before. And I was like, oh, we can take the bus back because it was cold out and his arm was getting stiff to navigate his joystick. And so we were waiting for the bus. It pulls right up. And I remember we all stood there, and the bus driver opened the doors, and she looked at him and she said, I'm running late. I can take everyone but the wheelchair.
Goodness.
And she's like, there's another bus right behind me. And I just like, my jaw was on the ground. Because A, it's illegal. B, she diminished him to an object, his
Yeah.
wheelchair. Um, and it just was, it was maddening. Like I was like, no, this is literally the most accessible form of transportation. Like what New York City has done with its bus system really is what makes it an accessible city for, especially for individuals using wheelchairs. So it was so frustrating, and like he, of course, like laughed about it, and I was always like, lets it roll off. But I was really angry. So that was like the main one. I remember more often than not, I think we find people to be very accommodating. I remember the first year he came to the marathon, it was his first trip after his injury, and he was still pretty frail. He had been in the hospital for about a month before that trip with pneumonia. And so I just like was riddled with anxiety because I was like, how are people going to treat him? And I remember we walked into a restaurant at Lincoln Center, didn't have a reservation. We're fully prepared to wait an hour. The hostess looked at it. He's like, "Oh, come right this way," and he intentionally like wanted us to not feel like we were stuck in the entry of the restaurant and sat us immediately. Same thing. It was the year the 9/11 museum opened. They were like, "Come to the front," So my husband likes to refer to these things as wheelchair perks. So there are some, like you do sometimes get preferred parking and an expedited line, but we found mostly it is people are usually pretty accommodating. Where I think is frustrating is the idea of design, especially when you
Mm,
see a new building that doesn't have necessarily the best accessible design, because it's so easy to incorporate it.
yeah.
We obviously understand if like buildings are historic or they're on a registry, like that's going to be difficult for us to access. um yeah, it's the new buildings, and it's like, what, did you really take people with disabilities into account when you're doing, because I do think like the ADA was landmark legislation, but it's the bare minimum. Like we need so much more.
Yeah, this is maybe like the hill I will die on, and like a soapbox that so I feel so passionate about. I don't know if you heard the quote "design for one, extend to many," but it's
Mm-mm.
like there's such a need. I was talking to someone and they mentioned how being part of the disability community is the one minority group where any of us could just enter at any point in our life, and it's something you've touched on earlier too. It's like your spouse like could get diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, could have something happen to them. And truly it could happen to every single one of us, so it's I'm not gonna go into a subbox and
No,
also
I
that, but
no,
it's
but I completely agree with you.
so
It's the
true.
idea of like, if someone is remodeling their bathroom, they should always do a walk-in shower or
Yes,
roll-in shower, because I don't think people understand. Like we've been to hotels and we've requested, and I think anybody that uses a wheelchair or a mobility device in general knows that there's you can reserve a roll-in shower accessible
in hotel.
room, but
Mhm.
when you get there, more times than not, it's not available. There's been so many times that that's happened to us, and the shower has like a 3-inch lip, and they're like, well, can't he still get into this? And I was like, no, because if I tilt his shower chair backwards, it's on two tiny wheels that could come out from under him. um, and they don't understand. It's the same thing with like a missing curb cut. Like I feel like we're always having to go to the end of the block and around, like whenever there's
Yes,
any construction or anything. I saw it this week when we were in Denver. um but yeah, it makes no sense. Like for me, it's like, what if a hotel, and I have seen this in some hotels, just made every single bathroom a roll-in shower? Then if there weren't any accessible rooms available, you're still going to be able to have access to a shower.
yes,
You see it a lot in European design. I remember when I visited Italy, like the whole bathroom is a wet space. So literally, it's all tile. You get water on the toilet, you get it on the floor. Like it's all just one space. So I think we need to adopt more of that, and also just the idea like as people age, they naturally lose their mobility.
yes. I
So
yeah. I
it's
could not agree more. I could not
yeah.
agree more.
I think traveling is so important to feel as a part of society. I know that like I love traveling. I love meeting new people. I love experiencing new cultures and foods. Um, and it's frustrating because I feel like so many people that rely on mobility devices feel like they can't travel because the accommodations, but also the issues with air travel.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Kelly, I want to give you the opportunity to give some shout outs and thank yous to people that are instrumental in you and JD's journey. So, you mentioned earlier your mother in law coming to spend the night when you were in Denver, but if you had a thank you list and you could write anybody's name on there, like who would you like to give some shout outs to?
Number one would be my husband's wound care doctor, Dr. Angela Driscoll. She works for the Baptist Health System here in Little Rock as well as for UAMS, which is our level one trauma center. She has been the most instrumental piece of our care team. My husband has suffered from some pretty bad pressure sores, one of which left him on total bed rest for 2 years. Um, and I didn't know her as well in the beginning, and I was frustrated that he was healing, and I remember thinking like she's not doing enough. And then I went to his appointments with him. I met her and I was like, oh my god, she's literally trying to move mountains. My husband has been very fortunate, especially when he got injured when he was 22, so he got to remain on his parents' private insurance till he was 26. And he had great access. Like we had to go to Stanford to get his clot filter removed because nobody would move it here. So we had like the best surgeon there. We went to Shepherd. We had phenomenal OTs and therapists, and we also got to go to KKI in Baltimore and had an amazing experience there. But without a doubt, Dr. Driscoll here in Little Rock has been our most life-saving physician. She came to my husband's graduation. She without her, he may not be here because she just provides such a level of care to every single one of her patients, and she wants them to be able to live the life that they deserve. And I can never thank her enough for not only what she's done for him but for me. Like there's been so many times I've sobbed and she's just hugged me and cared for us and prayed for us and just been like the biggest support at every turn. Next would obviously be both of our parents. Like they if we needed anything, they would give it to us like in a heartbeat. They would do anything to help us. Even JD's dad, like with some of the FDA approvals and devices that are coming out, he's like, whatever it takes, I'll get it for you. And we just could not say thank you enough for that level of support, because again, like I said earlier, a lot of people don't have it, and it's really unfortunate, and you need it, you really need it. And then we had Coach Mark. He was our team Reeve running and hand cycle coach for 17 years. And he sadly was diagnosed with ALS a few years ago. And he passed actually on the anniversary of JD's accident. And he and his wife, Barbara, have just been such instrumental parts of not only JD's journey, but really mine. Mark was my biggest cheerleader. He recommended me for this job. He held me accountable, but he was always the first person to acknowledge everything that I did within my job, and also the care that I provided to my husband, and the fact that like this life is not easy, and that just having someone acknowledge that and see that is so affirming. I think even I take for granted what I do every day. And it's when my best friends remind me, like, Kelly, you're living an abnormal life. And it's a lot of people live it, unfortunately, but just that recognition that you're doing a lot, like,
Yeah.
and you deserve to be recognized for it. It's not wanting pity or praise, but it's just the like realization, like, oh, you're right. Like, you get really good at it, especially if you have a really good relationship with the person that you're caring for, which my husband and I do. It's just become second nature. But you still like to be reminded of everything that you're doing. It can be really, it's affirming.
Yeah.
And then of course, like the Reeve Foundation, I like literally, I don't know where we would be without them. Especially my colleague Bernadette. She works for our paralysis resource center. She's been there since before Christopher and Dana died. She's a quadriplegic herself, and she's one of our most skilled information specialists. Um, the level of individual care, not only does she give to like anyone that comes into our paralysis resource center, which could be for anything. We see people come in and they don't know how to navigate their state's Medicaid system, or they keep getting denied. They don't know how to get on SSDI. She and her team help anyone navigate those things. All the ways to things like finding an accessible college or finding grant funding to modify your vehicle so that you can still save it or still drive it. But she's so committed to our organization and to those living with disabilities, and our entire information specialist team. They are really, really remarkable humans, many of whom are living with spinal cord injuries or other disabilities. And I think that they are truly like the embodiment of Chris and Dana because they're on the front lines every day. They've received just honestly really tragic and sometimes traumatic stories, and they're still able to help people. The number of people that I've talked to that have come to me to Team Reeve through the PRC that said like the Reeve Foundation saved my loved one's life. Without them, like I don't know where we'd be today. So I have just like so much immense like respect for those, and really like our entire executive leadership team at Reeve. Like it really is, I swear this is not like an advertisement. It really is like a a wonderful place to work. I really have just some of the most thoughtful and considerate colleagues that I could ask for.
I love that so much. Like it's I think it's very interesting. I usually ask this question to every guest, but I love whenever the answer includes both like a personal circle and then a professional circle because it really shows that you are supported where you work, and I think it's something that's very important, like you mentioned about earlier too.
I completely agree, and I think disability can often be the piece that is most forgotten in inclusion and diversity.
Yes.
And I think individuals with disabilities bring so much to the workforce that other people like myself, had we not had this life altering experience, things I would have never thought about, like a missing curb cut, or, you know, at a bank, having a teller station that is wheelchair accessible. You know, these are just things that seem very minute to the able bodied population, but they make those that are living with disabilities feel included. And like they're welcome in those spaces. And I think they just bring amazing ideas. And, you know, we've proven that people with disabilities tend to hire 10 times more individuals with disabilities than the average person. And I think the better we can incorporate them into society and welcome them, I think the better we're all going to be off. Because, like you said earlier, things that impact people with disabilities and those adjustments that you may ultimately have a ripple down effect. We see this with one of the examples I always give is the installation of beach mats.
Mm,
You know, it allows a person in a wheelchair to remain in their wheelchair and access a beach, um, which, you know, a lot of times people don't want to be in those bulky like beach wheelchairs, like they can't
yes.
adjust their chair, like it's, you know, it's uncomfortable. um, but they benefit others because think of someone who's elderly that just has trouble walking on the sand. Like you've removed that barrier from them. Also, people that carry wagons or they've got three kids with them. Like it's so
Yes.
much easier to carry your belongings and trek over a mat than having to go all the way through the sand. And I think we see that just like carried out through society. When you provide access to one group, it extends far beyond that.
100%. Yes. Kelly, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to mention?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on the podcast. I also wanted to say thank you to Spero and the clinic for helping us with our Boston Marathon
Yes.
campaign. I don't know if anyone knows about that yet, but how we got connected was one of our runners, Martin Quinn from the Boston Marathon, was chosen by Bank of America to be one of their two main features of the campaign, and we partnered with the clinic to do some in clinic shots of one of their amazing patients and help share Martin's story. And so I'm so glad we made this connection, and I'm so glad clinics like yours exist. I think we need more and more of them throughout the country so more individuals with disabilities can access the care that they need.
Yes, and I cannot wait to see the final product. I'm so excited.
I think it might be ready. So
Oh
I
my
think they were
goodness.
supposed I think they were supposed to send it this week, but I will double check on that.
Okay,
But yeah, it's I've seen it. It's phenomenal.
I'm excited. Well,
Yeah, it's really great.
thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you for taking the time to have the conversation with me and sharing a little bit about like your personal story, like Reeve resources, and then also you and JD's amazing, beautiful story too. So I
Well,
really
thank you.
appreciate you.
I appreciate being on. Thank you.